Hello everybody and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I know it's been a minute, but I am excited to create some new content for you guys. It is the third week of classes, I believe, or I just finished my third week of classes rather, and we've been in person for about 2 weeks now and things are going good. Basically, I just wanted to make this video to give you guys some insight into what it was like for me to find a job for this upcoming summer. I know that everybody stresses out about 1L summer jobs, and rightfully so. It's an extremely stressful process, and I'm just grateful for Columbia to giving me the resources that I needed to secure a job for the summer. In addition to that, I'm grateful for the mentors that I have who have always been willing to give me advice on things that I should be doing and things like that. So let's get into it. Basically, I'm going to start off this video telling you guys about Columbia's Office of Career Services specific process for applying to jobs, and then I'm going to walk you guys through just some tips and tricks, whether those are interview tips and tricks or just some details about my resume, my cover letter, my writing sample, and things like that. And then I'm going to show you guys some documents that I use to stay on track during the application process. To start, I just want to say that Columbia does have a very comprehensive Office of Career Services, and with that being said, within the first month or two of school, we had webinars telling us what we needed to do to get summer funding if we wanted to go the public interest route, and what we needed to do to secure that summer funding, and what we needed to hand into the Office of Career Services. So just to backtrack a second, Columbia, or all schools, probably law schools rather, there is a public sector and a private sector. And so public sector is public interest work. You might want to be a nonprofit or even a judicial externship or internship, and private sector is a firm. And so I applied to both, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So with the public sector, Columbia does give summer funding to students who do public sector because a lot of your public sector jobs aren't going to be paid. I think Columbia pays about $22.50 an hour for a 40-hour work week for the summer, which is a pretty good, it's a pretty good deal if you ask me. And so there's that option, but with that, there's a lot of things that you have to do in order to make sure that you are going to get the funding. And private sector, I mean, it's big law, so you're making a lot of money. Obviously, Columbia is not going to give us money for that. To start, for Columbia, you have to submit a resume and a cover letter to your private sector and public sector career advisor or counselor. And you have to have an initial meeting with both the advisor for public sector and advisor for private sector. So with that, I kind of made sure that I had my resume and my cover letter done and sent it over for review to my advisors and counselors so that during our meeting we could kind of walk through it. And I had a list of questions to prepare to ask the advisors, you know, just what their overall thoughts were on the application process and what a timeline looked like for me. And with that being said, I knew that I was going to be applying to both public sector and private sector, but I know that private sector applications, they don't open until December 1st, most of them, but Columbia also doesn't let you apply to private sector jobs until after December 1st. With that being said, I had my first initial meetings with both career counselors. We did a quick overview of what their suggestions were. I incorporated them and then I sent them back to them review right before I was about to apply. I think I did that right before Thanksgiving just to give them some time to review, and that way I didn't have anything to worry about over my Thanksgiving break, even though it wasn't really a break. And so after that, by the time I got back from Thanksgiving, I was really ready to submit all of my application materials. So I applied to, like I said, both of them. I waited until December 1st to apply to my private sector jobs, and that was pretty much it. So now we have a cover letter for both. So I have a cover letter for my public sector jobs and a cover letter for my private sector jobs. Basically the same format. However, they are different obviously depending on the job. So if I applied to a civil rights law firm, for example, which I did, I was obviously talking about what my interest was in civil rights, but if I was applying to a firm, I'd be talking about why that firm interests me and things like that. And then going on to the writing sample. Now, for the writing sample, I only had to submit a writing sample for my public sector jobs, and with that, I actually ended up using my closed memo from my legal practice writing workshop, which a lot of people use. That's also what was recommended to me, not only by 2Ls and 3Ls, but also from my career advisors. I think it was about 5 pages, things like that. I did have my writing professor look it over again just to make sure it was polished. I had one of my mentors look it over for me, and I had the writing center look it over for me too before submitting it to the jobs. A lot of the positions for 1Ls at these big firms are going to be diversity fellowships, and with that, I think that it's important to note that there are diversity statements. These firms would like to know why diversity matters to you, and like, why do you deserve a position at our firm, specifically a diversity fellowship position. And so in my diversity statement, I talked about my experience at Howard and how that taught me the importance of a network and things like that. I will say that my diversity statement built off my diversity statement from my law school applications, which I think is a very good starting point. A few firms asked me for references, but most of the people that asked me for references were my public sector applications, or places of interest rather. And so with that, I think it was like a list of 3 references, and for that I used my legal writing professor, and I used my old boss for the nonprofit that I worked for in college, and I used the past associate vice president of student affairs at Howard for my references. I'm not really sure if any of those people were reached out to, but I did just provide a list with their cell, email, and what my relationship to them was. Those are like the components. Oh, and then you have your transcripts, of course, which, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. Some firms are different and not look at your application until you do send in your transcripts. Some of them don't really like it. That's not going to stop the process for them. For me, I submitted my applications to firms on December 1st, most of them, and with that being said, I didn't have my grades yet because I hadn't even taken a final. And so a lot of the firms will have on their website, on the application portal, it'll say like transcripts unavailable right now, or I haven't taken finals, and then they'll give you an email for you to send your transcripts once you do get them, so it's easy to keep it all together. So that's kind of like a general overview of what the process was like for me, and now I'm kind of gonna get into it a little bit more. It was recommended to all of us that we should apply to at least 15 or 20 jobs before Christmas. I know it sounds like a lot, but the point is that there's like 400 people in my class at least. A lot of people are going to be applying to the same jobs. It's really competitive, so you do want to cast a wide net, which is exactly what I did. I ended up applying to 7 jobs on December 1st, and I think the rest of that I did like 8 more shortly after that. To me, it was super important for me to get it all out of the way before finals. I didn't want to worry about it before I really like went and was knee deep in Civ Pro and torts and contracts, and so that's a personal choice. I know a lot of people who did not submit applications on December 1st because they just didn't want to, or they didn't have their materials ready, or they just didn't want to wait. They just wanted to wait until after finals to do it, which is completely fine. I think everybody's timeline is up to them. And I will say that from personal experience, firms were reaching out to me to like interview or things like that, asking for my grades. I would say like the second week in January. So if you don't apply on December 1st, it's really okay, because some firms do wait until January to even start reviewing materials, it does seem like. So timeline is completely up to you, and it's a personal preference, but for me, I just knew I didn't want to deal with it during finals or even on my break, because I only had like a 2-week winter break, so that's just not what I wanted to spend my winter break doing. And so with that being said, I did do 5 public interest positions, and I did 10 firms. All the firms I applied to had an office in Chicago, as that's where I want to be this summer and after graduation. And so the same thing for public interest job. I did apply to some in DC as well. I would say you should apply to the city that, especially if you're doing a diversity fellowship, I think you should apply to the city that you see yourself living in. I know a lot of people though that I go to school with like want to stay in New York. I don't want to do that, and so I knew that I wasn't going to be applying in New York.
Okay guys, I actually decided to create a part 2 of this video, which will go over interview tips and tricks and how I organize my job applications on Google Sheets. So make sure to tune in next week for part 2.